Hope you're all in community wealth and health and peace, finding ways to be present. I'm seeing some beautiful faces. Yeah, feel free to be on or off camera. I know some folks are out there. I see Kim Gaddy walking around. Beautiful. Today we have two fellows, amazing fellows who are joining us to share their experience as executive directors, senior leaders, and we've had a number of informational sessions. So I'm Angela Maecha, I'm the director of the fellowship, and we just finished an incredible cohort. It was 2 years, feels like a lot on the front end, but as you're getting closer to the end, you're like, you want to keep extending it. So a lot of those fellows actually are going to be active in an alumni network and a design network that we're building. So this time is really for you all. We had this call specifically for executive director and senior leaders. We're going to have another call for group formation. And before we get started, just want to know that we're always available for questions. This is a little bit of a different process. We want different kinds of results, so we have to do things a little differently. So this is like position for a group formation. And so in this process of applying, questions may come up. And so we want to be available for you on that. So yeah, maybe we start with a little bit of a background, and then I'm going to pass it to both Raul and Maria to share their experience as directors in this process and kind of what came out of it. So we'll be able to talk about the application selection process. We'll share their experience. We'll create a lot of time for question and answer. So that's the goal as we run through some of this. Feel free to, introduce yourselves on the chat. Let us know where you're coming from. We have your emails, and we'll keep you in the loop as the application process comes to. So the application process is supposed to be released December 1st. And like we said, we want to support you in the process of developing it. So maybe we start on slide number 3. And so we talked about, this is a little bit of a different process, right? It's not usually for individual leaders, it's for group formations. And so be able to do that in environmental justice, thus the concept and the practice of collective leadership is fundamental to how we work. And we have alliances and coalitions in different places where we manifest the practice of that. But what we're realizing is that we still need support and places to be in collective leadership together, that practice as leadership in a predominant environment where individual leadership is centered is still a place where we need to build towards. So the fellowship gives us an opportunity to do that. Throughout the process, we apply EJ design practices for the kind of innovation we need in the movement. And we practice together through it. So there's a whole phase process around it. There's an emphasis on traditional ecological knowledge, bringing back that indigenous knowledge, that ancestral wisdom, and putting that into practice and be able to build from those principles and those mindsets to be able to manifest those climate solutions or their environmental justice solutions. And the other piece that we're trying to do differently in the fellowship is that we're thinking about scale in a way that's centered around community. So what's the scale that feels right for the community or the vision of the climate solution that you're working on? And that could be, in your own community, that could be across many communities, or that could be for the movement as a whole. I mean, ideally, each one of you that applies and forms a group is making a contribution, not just to your community, but to the movement as a whole. And we're all learning and building from that. So we have a 10-year vision around that. We're realizing that the leaders that just came out of this cohort want to practice and be part of a community of practice. And so our goal is to have a EJ design network that is aligned with the fellowship that then gives us an opportunity to be with designers and tech coaches and accelerate this the different concepts of scale for the solutions in the EJ movement. And this all came about because we were thinking about, like, what are the things that EJ leaders need, right? It often feels like leaders like yourselves are stuck in this action spiral where you're like going from one action to the next, moving from one emergency to the next, and not having that space and that time to ground, reflect, learn, reframe. And this 2-year opportunity gives you that. We're also realizing there's so many incremental solutions out there for climate, for environmental solutions that aren't aligned with the way that we as communities work. And so that's been harmful. And so we want to be able to creatively really identify the problems, assure that they're rooted, and that we're addressing kind of the roots of those problems and not some of the incremental situations that are a result of some of those root causes. Yeah, and so, there's each phase that you go through in the fellowship, and that's why it's 2 years. We're addressing other issues like the incremental solutions. We're addressing the fact that a lot of our systems are at a breaking point, and how we adapt or are in alignment with building a new future around that. And that the fact is right now, the focus is on one solution, carbon-centric solutions. And so this is an opportunity to really build and practice scaling and building power around multiple solutions. You can go to the next one. Next PowerPoint. Slide 4. Part of what we're so even though we've just gone through a 2-year process, the fellowship started about 4 years ago. We did a whole landscape assessment on the movement. So there was about 160 leaders that were interviewed in the process. And what came out of that assessment, obviously we're looking like, what do people want to learn? What kind of communities they want to be a part of when they're learning and learning. And the areas that came up were just transition, public health, energy democracy, climate justice, amongst other things, right? There was, there's a wanting to build power around energy systems. Like there's a lot of other areas that came up, but those were the ones that came to the top. This time around, under having some more interviews, we're realizing that the political opportunities could be in deepening false solutions, investigating further how to implement cumulative impacts. Obviously, with the election coming up, there's a lot of energy around swing states and voting rights. And over the last 2 years, there's been a tremendous shift in the environmental justice movement towards infrastructure investments in city and states and regions. So we're realizing that might also be a place where movement leaders like yourself are already in conversation with other movement leaders about what's possible in terms of scaling solutions around climate, or what you're already doing and you need support on. In no way should the fellowship feel like something additional that you're putting onto your shoulders as leaders that have to do so much, but that it's a channel or a vehicle for you to be able to energize thought leadership, practice, and push your own individual leadership to grow. So with that, I think it's a good pivot to introduce Rawa and Maria, who were part of the first cohort. They were part of one of the groups. So there's 6 groups that we had, 16 leaders in total. And I'll let you all talk about your prototype, your experience, why you think other leaders should be part of it. But Rawa's from, used to be a Push Buffalo, and Maria Lopez is with the Ironbound Community Corporation. They were part of a larger core group, which was Team 1, that then, shifted and changed into the agency. So should I pass it to you, Rawa?
Hello. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us on a Friday. So one of the things that I think Maria and I definitely want to do is energize all of you, because we know that the world is a tough place right now and everybody feels really overwhelmed. And so hopefully in sharing our experience with the fellowship over the last 2 years, which was, yes, an incredible time commitment. And at the same time, like I know for me personally, it just breathes so much more life than I was having as an executive director. And as part of not just the fellowship, but as part of my plan, I was also going to transition out of my organization. So happy to talk about how that transition went. But yeah, so Rawa Gurmatzian, currently with the agency, previously the executive director of Push Buffalo, and I will pass it on to my colleague, Maria.
Yeah, so I'm Maria Lopez Nunez. I'm with the Ironbound Community Corporation, and Yeah, like I think many of you, I'm on a ton of boards and committees and working groups. So it's kind of like, why would you join something else, especially something that's like a 2-year commitment? Um, but what was amazing, I think, in terms of trying to think, how did we get here? I think when we applied, it was probably like the most work I was doing, period. I had just been appointed also to the White House Environmental Justice Advisory Council. So many things have been happening in our movement since COVID. You know, like it was just like a wild time to say, like, let's do the fellowship. Um, but I think for me, what I realized is I needed help. Um, I just needed help. I was lonely. I was doing all that work and spending so much time with movement colleagues, but it was always about work and it was always about struggle, and that there was no really space for me to talk through things that might be uncomfortable as a leader, that I can't maybe talk to my colleagues in my workplace, because a lot of the staff, they all report to me, right? So who is there to talk to about sensitive HR things, think through problems in the movement that I just have as a leader? I think that was important, and that's kind of like what drew me to the fellowship in the beginning, but since then, of course, it's evolved, and yeah, that's who I am, and that's how I got here. Angela, there's specific questions we're answering here?
No, I thought we could just share, first the experience, and then we'll open it up for questions. I'm imagining people are going to have questions.
Yeah, Rawa, you want to start with the experience?
Sure. I also just want to say Maria is a very humble person. So Maria actually organized our group, which was 4 folks. We were all living in different parts of the country, but each of us was really focused in doing place-based initiatives. So that's what originally brought us together, is we were doing kind of similar work, but we had Dwayne Tyndall, who's in the executive director of ACE in Boston, Roxbury to be specific, but the Boston area. Mia Yoshitani, who had just transitioned out of being the executive director of APEN, which is Asian Pacific Environmental Network in Richmond, California. Obviously, Maria in New Jersey, Newark, and myself in Buffalo, New York. And so what brought us together was really this concept around, we are organizers first and foremost. And the reason why we joined the movement is that we wanted to build power in order to make the just transition that we were all seeking. And so our sort of unique set of an issue that we wanted to identify doing this work is really just naming the fact that we did not have enough power to make the transformative changes that the EJ movement needed us to make. That was step one. And then part of that is, how do we diagnose, number one, why are we not building power? Why is the right kicking our ass? Sorry, I'm going to cuss. And then B, it's like, what are the disruptive things that we can do in this moment and actually seize the opportunity of where we are? Because you know what, there was all of these, the bill infrastructure, IRA, IIJA, all of these things really came out of the hard work of EJ over the last 20, 30 years. And yet we were now in a moment, rather than reaping the benefits, kind of like incapacitated and not able to help transform and actually, get all these benefits into our community. So what do we do? Because we felt like a lot of urgency around that was, well, number one, we needed to start talking about power again, and actually what are the disruptive ways that we can get folks to mobilize much more quickly around what does it look like to build that power. I'm going to stop there because I feel like I've said a lot, but over those 2 years, as we were tackling this kind of like really overwhelming problem, we were also learning from the new school, what are the different strategies around disruption, right? And so we got a lot of different tools, and we were able to analyze and prototype and fail quickly and fail fast and fail forward, and learn to appreciate and love that. But I think what was also just really nourishing over the last 2 years was the way we were respected, taken care of, and taken care of, meaning we were resourced to do this. There was no Hunger Games going on here. We were giving opportunities for spaciousness and a lot of autonomy within, the confines of what were the assignments. We're leaders. We've been doing this for 20 plus years. We don't need people telling us what to do. Let's just be honest, right? Like, come on. But what are ways that we can actually step back and not deal with the every single day of like just the stress that we wear here, and actually create the spaciousness and make us those creative individuals that got us to the positions that we're in right now. So yeah, I'll end there. And Maria, if you want to take it from there.
Yeah, I think what's important to consider is like, are you in a place personally, forget professionally, but like personally willing to challenge yourself? Because I think that that's incredibly important. And I saw some colleagues struggle with that, right? Like, because we're so burnt out, maybe we're just looking for somewhere to affirm us. And that affirmation is important. And I think it's something we were giving to each other as core group members. But I think what's for me a really important thing in order to utilize this fellowship well is like, can you challenge yourself to be humble amongst colleagues, right? And have humility to admit where we're falling short. Because we talk about what are our needs and obstacles as things that other people are in control of. But I don't know that in our movement, I'm hearing enough self-reflection about what are the things that we do that fuck us up, right? Like, what are the things that we do that get in our own way, where we make ourselves small, even when the oppressor's not in the room, we're the ones limiting ourselves, right? And I think if we could find time, the fellowship's a wonderful opportunity to explore that with leaders you trust. So in terms of forming a group, especially if an executive director or a senior leader, I would really recommend that it not be because you're trying to mentor someone. That I don't think is the best use of this fellowship, right? It's not about others. It's about being with your colleagues, your equals, so that you can have open conversation. Because I think as leaders in this movement, we're always put in that position where everything we say is under scrutiny, right? Like everything we say is something to be analyzed by others. We're always having to be in that mentorship stance and be an example. And I think that that does not allow us the space to be humble, the space to be critical of ourselves and each other, right? And the space to like push each other to grow. Because our movement has achieved a great many things, but one thing this IRA moment taught me is that we're still stuck in our like grassroots mentality, and we're shy. We're shy about claiming what we've won politically, and we're shy about taking more political power. I think a lot of us are more comfortable outside protesting instead of trying to be in that hand-to-hand wrestling and that contending with power in a more direct way that's not just always on the streets, you know. And that our communities do need a combination of strategies if we're going to move forward. Because, you know, as much I believe, and I come from a country that's gone through many revolutions and change, but that's not what I'm seeing on the ground here. And I don't think that we have our story together. And so I do think that this fellowship is an opportunity for leaders to continue to be in conversation with each other, pushing each other and trying to figure out what are our real tactics, what's our real messaging, in order to push our whole movement forward, not just our individual communities and neighborhoods. Because we say trans-local organizing, solidarity, this, that, and the other, but we don't have a shared strategy of how to push our states forward and our federal government forward in a way that we need. And we know that jurisdictionally, not all our problems are solved at the local level, that we do need to be moving federal agencies and federal budgets in a different way in order to properly resource our communities, you know. And those are conversations we need to have. If people disagree with that, if people are full on anarchy, whatever it is, I think it's important to have the discussion. I'm not saying that there is a way, there are many ways, but as EJ leaders, it's our responsibility to engage in real critical dialogue away from the white gaze, you know, away from the funder gaze, and to just have our own space in order to move. And so as you're considering if you're going to, you know, jump into this, it doesn't serve you if you jump into this half time, right? Like if you're like, yeah, I'm gonna do it, but I don't really have time for it and I don't prioritize it, because not being at these meetings would have been just a disgrace. Like we made practically all the meetings in person together. Like you actually have to show up, and you're only going to get what you put in, right? So if you're not showing up, then I think don't waste the space. If you don't feel like you can make the space in your own life, don't just take up a seat here, because it's only like 12 or 16 seats, right? And so I think it's important for the EJ leaders that are ready to like and are hungry to be in those seats. And I do think that even though it's a small amount, it's very powerful, the work that we do together in that small intimate space where we're not on anyone else's agenda. It's our own agenda, and we have control over what comes out of it.
Thank you. Thanks so much. So much came out of that. Part of the experience in this time around was that we use the space not only for that building and growing, seeing a lot of love and appreciation on the chat, but we're also using it as an organizing space. So you hear a lot of the fellows that came out of this because the moment was around the IRA, around the IJA, and the other federal drawdowns and legislations. We use the opportunity to organize with leaders around that. And so there's technical coaching. There was moments of support networks that came in, and who I'm not sure what this next cohort will bring. You know, is it a building on of that? Is it another movement moment that we'll use the space to also organize and put forth that leadership? I want to take a break and see what's coming up for you. Why did you consider this? What's on your mind as you're looking at a fellowship? What are some expectations that you might have? Does any of this resonate? Just want to hear from some of you. Break it up a little. Feel free to just get off of the mic. And welcome you, some of new folks that are coming on.
Everyone, Kim Gaddy, Southwood Environmental Alliance. I guess for me, although I've been in this space for 24 plus years, I started my own EJ organization. And oftentimes when now you are responsible for moving an organization as the founder and executive director, you need a different kind of support system. And so for me, I said, let me just inquire. Maria mentioned it to me, and I said, let me inquire and see what it will all entail, because I do think that oftentimes you need that other space where you're talking peer to peer, but with people who understand and feel what you're going through, trying to maintain and sustain an EJ group, you know, that's responsible for saving lives. And so that's why how I'm entering into this space, and, you know, want to hear more and see how that can be advantageous to me and assist with my growth.
Yeah, for sure, Kim. Like, I think that's the biggest takeaways. We create the container, but you all pick the people, right? So this is a big investment to be like, you know, in the last 2 years or so, how many people that I feel inspired by, that I want to grow with, and who build off of things that I may not have, but I know we need for the movement. Darnell, did I see you get off from you?
Yeah, yes, ma'am, sorry. New to this space, as a person of color in Southern Illinois. Illinois is trying to be the leader in environmental justice work, and the organization that I'm the new ED of. I'm looking for help to how to weave this narrative of environmental racism, how to make the language plain enough for people that look like me to understand and want to get on board, because it affects housing justice, it affects the criminal justice system, and so I'm looking for peers whom I can learn from, because I don't know it all. Still trying to learn. How can I do that and be an effective part of my little slice of heaven that I call East St. Louis, and make it a better place. So I would like, my self-interest is to have people that look like me live in a sustainable community, where there's greenhouses, there is no more food deserts. We're talking about individuals who go to prison and live in inhumane prison conditions.
Yes,
You are not a human when you go into the prison system. And so how do we attack those things from an environmental racism perspective? I don't like using environmental justice. It doesn't flow well in my community, but environmental racism, that's what piqued my interest about a possible fellowship opportunity.
Yeah, so I just want to remind folks what, you know, we've really been telling you is the beautiful thing about this fellowship is that they create the container, but you get to choose your little cohort, right? So it's usually, I think you have to be a minimum of 2 people. I think 2 to 4 people works really well. 2 to 3 people is really like the sweet spot, right? And so what you want to do is pick other people that can help you think through whatever problem you are trying to solve. Like, so our cohort, like I said, we were attacking power and the need to build more power for the kind of transformative changes and ability to accept all of these new federal funds that are coming into our communities in ways that benefit our communities. But we had people that were working on food justice issues, that were working on, you know, things like burnout, for example. So there's a different way you can approach it, but you have agency to create what it is. And so that's how you're going to apply. And then I just wanted to say to Kim, like, you would make an amazing fellow. Who are the other people in your orbit, in your ecosystem, that are feeling very similar things? I mean, I can tell you founders syndrome is real. The need to also be thinking about leadership transition is real. Like, you know, both organizations that I worked for that became EDs of had to go through something like that. And so you want to be thinking about where you are right now doing this for 20 plus years. What is the thing that you really want to work on, right? That is the piece where Maria said, you know, we are lonely, like at the top. It is very lonely. And there are things that we need, and we are often the people that are nourishing others, but not receiving that nourishment ourselves. And so here's an opportunity where the new school's creating the container. And I am telling you, they will individually resource you, and they will resource your organization for you to be able to fully participate. I've never been a part of, I've done many fellowships, just so y'all know. I either had to like pay for it, but never been compensated for it, right? And even though there are other containers they will set for you, it's really driven by you. This is self-directed, right? The little group that you create, yeah, you're part of a larger 16-person cohort, but really your cohort is going to be working through your problems, and there will be opportunities for you to engage with the larger cohort. But there's also going to be moments where your individual cohort is going to be meeting outside of the larger group, working specifically on the issue or the meaningful thing that you want to be, why you want to be part of this cohort. That's what you're going to be working on.
Thank you. I appreciate folks putting questions in the chat too. If you're like, I'm not the type to get off of mute, you can put some stuff in the chat. I see some questions on the commitment and the requirement. So let me just do a little more on that, give you a little more information, and we'll open up again for some questions. Thanks, you all. So maybe we go into slide number 8 and take it from there. And we can post that, Maru. So like I said, you know, Rawa, Maria were part of one core group, but there were other core groups that participated, and a lot of shifts and changes happening, right? So this is part of being emergent, being part of starting to practice that muscle to be in a place of complexity. So you start off in one way, and as you continue to iterate through the phases of the fellowship, there are different formations that make sense for the kind of solution that you have. And there is pushback, and there is check-ins, and there is accountability at each of the phases. We do pulse checks, so we change our curriculum based on what we're hearing from where the cohort is moving. And we also make space, like Rawa said, for you all to be in comfortable spaces, but, you know, places that you have your dignity, that you can relax. These are all kind of woven into the way we build out our space. A lot of that agency is on you when we have different kinds of meetings. So we have meetings where we all come together, 16, and then meetings where the core group meets on their own. Then there's meetings that we have online, and then there's meetings with your technical coach and your process coach. And each phase will start getting you closer to figuring out who that technical coach might be based on your solution. But there are different groups came in differently. So some folks are very external facing for the movement. Like there is a problem external that's a threat or an opportunity, and they work really hard to deliver a solution around that or build a pilot for that. Then there were some folks that were building internally. For example, there were a group of 4 women who were working towards finding solutions and understanding and mechanisms to address Black burnout as executive directors. And so they, for example, did a number of different kinds of interventions that included trips back to Africa and Senegal, trips and spaces for people to meet with each other here in the US, and other opportunities around coaching and understanding and being in community. We had folks that came in from the different territories, and so they had island and regional solutions. So they tested a solution that they started off as very small, right? Like in their community, they had a summit, and that summit then became a Pacific summit. They built a declaration around it. They had 150 regional leaders come through it. And that's building out their leadership in the region. Through the organizing efforts that we did, we were able to bring in some supporters, and throughout the many different 16 organizations and groups, there was a distribution of at least $3 million from different supporters based on this particular cohort's needs and like direction of leadership. That might change. Yeah, so there's different opportunities for folks as they're going through it. Maybe go to slide 10. So I'm not going to go through each of the phases, but know that you're starting off with a deep sense of collective leadership and time to organize your group. So you might not be totally organized on the front end, and it might very well be that's one person trying to bring a couple people together, and that's fine. That's good. You know, that's one expression of collective leadership. But over the first phase, which is the first, 3 or 4 months, we'll be working with you, and you'll be working with your group to really understand and get those agreements, ways of working together, the purpose of why you're together, the understanding of the problem as you're addressing it in those first times. And then we keep, adding more to that experience. For some of you, like you said, Darnell, coming in as a new ED, we do some primers, like, primer on just transition, primer on liberation, primers on decolonization, so that you have some of that on the front. That's also happening in that first phase. And then from that point on, we bring in community group to design with you. You start practicing together, failing. Like, I think it's hard for us as leaders to accept that we need to fail on some things to be able to move forward. And then we start really understanding how to integrate power and scale, and being comfortable with talking about scale in the way that feels appropriate for the community and the solution that we're putting forth. So just a long way to answer some of the questions that come in. I think Corey said how much time. It's about 270 hours over the 2 years. So more of like, it's about a 2-3 day. It's like 3 days every time we meet as a cohort. Maybe we meet 4 times a year or so. And then you're meeting as a core group. So maybe you're meeting also for 2 or 3 days, twice a year. And so thinking about not like always consistent across the hours, but you're looking at moments of ebbs and flow. And we would send all of that in advance. You would negotiate that with your organization. You would have that time off. And then we would use that time to work and also rest. So we do assure that there's buffers in that time when you're off, that you also have time to rest, to be, to enjoy, and to reset before you go back to your organization. Let me see, what else do I share with you all? Maybe slide 12. So slide 12 is really like brass tacks, right? You got 2 years of support. Your fellows, as individual fellows, you get $28,000. That's to support you and your commitment. Maybe you need to buy resources or books, or, get some additional classes or something that really helps you go in your professional development. Maybe you need to have somebody do childcare while you're away. That's why those individual resources are there. Then we provide your organization between $17,000 and $20,000, depending if there's more than one fellow. What we learned is, like Maria said, it's good to work with peers. There are power dynamics that emerge when there's more than one person from one organization within that, as an executive director or the senior leader of that relationship, and for the person that's also engaging, may not be the best outcome, especially since this is surrounding our interaction with power and scale. But organizations get 20,000, and then ultimately you are producing something, right? There's something that comes out of this that is an offering, a gift, if you will, to the movement. And that prototype can get up to 60,000 from the seed money that we have, but we also have the opportunity to present you to other funders and folks that are wanting to support you in building that out. So this is a little bit of the relationship wheel that we have. There's our relationship with each other, with Mother Earth, with the movement, with trainers, with philanthropy, with the research team. So we have a research team at the Tishman Center that is also available and open to provide a deep sense of research or policy development with your core group if that's where you're going. And then slide 13. So there are some eligibility requirements. So yeah, we are still in our second cohort directing this for frontline environmental justice leaders. Doesn't mean that there can't be somebody from another sector within your group, but that the majority of the people in your group are working in the environmental justice movement, our community frontline groups. They're also very intergenerational. There's this first one, we had folks from all across the ages. And I think that's also beneficial as you're thinking about your group, how you want to set it up and what roles different people play. We ask that folks that apply do have some level of influence or understand the impact of influence in terms of decision-making. So having some level of decision-making power in your organization so that you're not working alone, but you can actually bring your organization with you if that's what feels right for the solution that you're doing. And that ultimately you're abiding by the HEMES principles, right? So that means those most impacted, those bottom-up organizing, people speak for themselves. Environmental justice and HEMES principles are at the core. Slide 14. Yeah, I think we covered most of these. Created for disruption. I think Rawa talked about it. So we're not looking for like a way to improve maybe a solution that's already there, but you're really thinking about how maybe a problem's been nagging for a while on your organization, on your community. You have a very clear target. So this is the opportunity to really disrupt what's been happening for some time. I think being able to navigate the collective leadership process and start thinking about it sooner, like now as you're building out the application, is going to be beneficial for you. Thinking, I know I'm a strong leader, but who are the other strong leaders I want to be a part of? Yeah, maybe we open it up for questions and answers. Like I said, we're going to have another informational on group formation after November 14th. So that's next week. And then the application process opens December 1st. So I'm going to open it up. We can have questions. We want to have more content. We're happy to hear from you.
Just point of clarification, when you say who are the other leaders within your respective communities, or are these other organizations?
You know, it's how I think it really think about the problem and or the relationships that you want to build. So maybe you are already part of a larger maybe you're part of already an alliance that's movement wide, and you want to build with some of those leaders. For example, Kim, you know that we had 4 leaders from the Moving Forward Network that all applied together. For example, we had, you know, CJA leaders from the board apply together. I think that's the kind of thinking. Remember, a lot of times you're thinking about movement problems at between sessions at a conference that you're going to, because you've got to speak here, speak there. So if there's that level, but perhaps your city is just about to start something, you know, and you all need to do that deep leadership within your city or your community, then you'll be like, I know exactly who I'm going to work with to make that happen, because that's a 2-year deadline. So think about the deadline that we have too. Not that you can't build beyond it, but 2 years. Yeah. So there's no limitations on our end.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Brooke Rodriguez. I'm one of the founders and community members from Boricua Taino Foundation. I currently live in Monte Lenape territory. I'm Boricua Taino, so three of my grandparents are Afro-Indigenous, and one is just Spanish and mixed. So we've been working in our region for a pretty long time, but formally as an organization over the last like probably year, we've gotten together to try to disrupt some of the complexities that have been happening in our communities, in particular in terms of leadership, tribal recognition in our territories, and then also land ownership. Because right now we're having huge issues with land grabs and being displaced at extremely high numbers. So what I was wondering is two things. Is there a maximum amount of leaders that we can pull from our community? And being that it's more tribally specific, could we like contribute more like families instead of institutions? Because we work with families, we don't really work with institutions or we did open up a not-for-profit, but that's to help us with some of the other stuff. So I was
Mhm,
wondering if we can switch from the more like
mhm.
organization or group to more like family leaderships and kind of increasing leaderships within our community.
Yeah. So a couple of things to think about. One is it has to go through a 501c3. So that is part of the process. So, you probably have it because that's your organization. And there are opportunities for families and community members to be part of the ideation process once you start thinking about how you're going to manifest that solution, So there's always an opportunity, and we want families and other community members. They don't have to be institutionalized. They don't have to be part of an organization that participate. We had a group from Organización Boricua who was there last year, who did like a huge community intervention to help them guide where their solution was going. That's going to happen regardless. And again, it's a maximum of 4 people that you can work with. So, and thinking about families, assuring that people can make all of the meetings and can feel committed to the solution. We don't have any stipulations on who can get in.
Okay, thank you for that.
Yeah. But remember, Brooke, this is not a grant, and this is not for you to do more work. This is to build your leadership. So think about it that way, to always be like, is this going to build my leadership?
One more question that I had, and I'm not sure if it will fit in the category, but what I'm really intentional about within my organization is succession planning, and then making the right kind of connections with parents, within schools, that next generation of leadership.
Hmm?
With succession planning for like EJ groups, could that be something that is talked about? Because there's what I haven't seen in this movement over the 20-something years is exactly that. And
Yeah,
I'm working on it now, and it's not enough resources to really help in that aspect.
that's a great one. I mean, I don't know, Maria Rawa, how you feel?
I mean, it's definitely a good one. And I can tell you that was not, I don't think, anybody's direct sort of issue they were attacking within the cohort, but it became part of our conversation regardless. And there were several conversations around transitions and doing just that as transition planning. And more, we're starting to hear that within our movement, just the importance of that is we have to create way and make way for new leaders. What does that look like? I mean, I really think that needs to be interrogated even more. And the good news is because we've already been through it, we were the guinea pigs, if you will, the pilot of the pilot, but many of us that are now going to be the alums have had this experience. And so we're happy to be used as references, advisors, what have you, as you go through the fellowship. So think about that too. And I can tell you the other thing is we love our technical coach. Our coaches were incredible. We call them all the time still. Just like, you know what I mean? That is a relationship that we've built and a resource that I think we're going to be utilizing for a long time to come.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it would be important then to be with people that are in a similar place, right? In terms of thinking about transition planning, because then you can hold each other accountable about like how that is going. It is interesting that in our group, a bunch of people ended up transitioning. And Kim, as you know, I'm trying to figure out my pivot out of here too, right? Like that does end up happening because I think with EJ, we get stuck being leaders forever, and we do need to rotate in ways that are healthy, so that we can keep growing. I don't know if it serves us to be at one organization for 30 years, like has been our history thus far, and maybe our movement's better served otherwise. But I think that's a wonderful topic, important to take up, but finding people who are in a similar place, because I do think that coming from just too drastically of difference, then you're just trying to figure out what you're talking about. But at least if you can agree on this is our topic and we're to hold each other accountable and all of us learn towards this end, that's a good way to go.
Yeah, thanks for Kim for noting that it's not only about getting the right group, it's like, what are you going to work on, and that you're going to be coming back to that. And there's moments where you love the problem, and there's moments you really just like, shut up about this problem, I can't hear it again. But then there's moments of breakthrough and just like love and appreciation for getting over that frustration together. So thank you for bringing in, the problem does matter. I see a hand up from Alex, and then some questions here on the chat too that we could address.
Hi, everyone. My name is Alex Cruz. I am the communications manager at Grinding Stone Collective. We are an Indigenous food justice and environmental justice, this all around sort of organization. And my question was regarding overlaps between different like partner organizations that are applying at the same time. Do you have to apply under one team, or if you have some overlap with other teams, are you able to apply through both? That's my question.
Yeah, no, we did have that last time. I think we just wanted you to note it in the application. And then I think it's helpful to have multiple. If you feel aligned, you shouldn't limit yourself. And yeah, just let us know. And I think there's actually a question in there in the application that has you to identify it. Remember, you all hold different hats too. So it's very likely you have a lot of overlap if we do this right. Because unfortunately right now, there aren't a ton of leaders doing all the work. And so you see you over and over again in many places. So no worries about that. Just note it. And there is also a question that asks you, what are the different hats that you wear across the movement? Thank you for that question.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Alex. Rami?
Hey there, folks. It's good to see all your faces. I mean, the question, that I had is, being an immigrant to the US, I felt, and, coming into the environmental justice space, I felt that it is very much, Northern Hemisphere centric in terms of like the idea of its inception, right? The idea of the inception of environmental justice coming, from the US and all of those notions, and the concept of thinking about indigeneity as something of the past rather than a current struggle for a lot of people outside of the current narrative and discourse. So, is there a possibility of thinking about the cohort working on kind of a piece, on a paper, on a report, on some kind of a framework that actually debunks the current discourse of indigeneity as something of the past and indigenous technology as something of the ancient times rather than something that is being practiced now, and creating that bridge between the global movement that exists for climate and environmental justice, as opposed to it being something that is, no offense to Dr. Bullard, but started with Dr. Bullard, right?
Of course. Yes, no, very much so. There's space for that kind of integration. We try to make sure that as we're looking at applications, we see across the board, we understand that traditional ecological knowledge is not something from the past. It's very much centered in the way we do the work. So we do work with people that have looked at the curriculum from a decolonized perspective, and the people that have contributed to traditional ecological knowledge being centered in the way that even the government is looking at Indigenous communities. So not to center it not only on Turtle Island, but there's folks from other territories. I'm happy to see so many people here from Indigenous communities. Part of what we're learning and why we need more Indigenous people to be applying is that we're decolonizing design. Design is very centered, it's the corporate centered, and the truth is that we are revisiting those ancestral practices. So that would be very much welcome. And I think it's a good source that that could contribute to the movement. Again, this is a good opportunity, not just to contribute to your organizations or to the communities that you're a part of, but to contribute to the movement.
Can I just
Thank
add
you.
one other thing to that? I just want to say too, is like, there is nothing prescriptive about this fellowship. And we had, again, folks, I don't know if you got to see, there was a response that Maru sent is, we have our Indigenous brothers and sisters in Puerto Rico. We went there actually during one of the hurricanes and both helped, with recovery, but also continued. I'd been to Puerto Rico many, many times as like a visitor. And it was the first time that I went back and said, you know what, I can see a completely different Puerto Rico as a result. And we called it Boricuen. So we're actually going back to also naming things and what matters. And then we finished our fellowship in the Mariana Islands because we had our cohort from there. And it was not just, even though the fellowship is limited to US and US territory, we had people there from all kinds of the Micronesian islands, from Okinawa, from, Palau, from the Marshall Islands, you name it. And everything was rooted actually going back to their Indigenous practice, not just their language, but their cultures and traditions. And we saw people building ships and really showing us the way. So just really saying that this fellowship was so dynamic on so many levels, and it has just a lot of layers, you know what I mean? There is that trust building that we did with our initial cohort, and like where we got to, like that was very much like going internal and doing a lot of internal reflection, right? But then everything that we did outwardly is that we're all learning from each other. And, we talked a lot about decolonization, demilitarization, really thinking about, what is happening in Gaza, for example, has an impact in that region that we were in and how they felt it so palpable, and that, like talking about security and their own security and what that means. So it really is about the cohort and what they give to the cohort. And then you as the beneficiary, also what you receive from it. So it's really rooted in what y'all do together. Sorry.
Yeah, and I do think it's important. I see other hands up, but I do think it's important also to name, like, there's not like one EJ, and I do want to push back, and like EJ has never, I think, in my understanding of EJ, been so like US centered, because I feel like EJ is always expanding and trying to make those relationships with partners in the global South. That's why EJ folks have been going to COP before it was cool, like, and making sure that we're always making those connections of colonization, across the oceans and within, because there's a lot of territories and tribes right here. And so I've only experienced EJ in a way that is completely intersectional. And I wouldn't relinquish that just because some folks are more published or visible. Let us not like rewrite history, because then I think we're engaging in that erasure ourselves. That's something I have not actually really witnessed in our movement. I see it being robust and trying to fit in everybody in a way that's overflowing and beautiful.
Thank you. I'm gonna first bring in Nawi and then Brooke, and then maybe end with a couple things.
Ali Punja Machikunda. Pashi, Kaiman Chaya Mutishkamanda, Nukashamuni, Nukanchi, Tawantin Suyu, Jaktamanda, Aviala, Alpa, Ukumanda, Chaya Muskakapani, Kaiman, Kimirhuni, Ashata, Nukanchi, Yuyaita Kachamugapa. Hello, everybody. I am a citizen of the Abya Tawantinsuyo. I belong to the Quechua and Runa nation of the Andes and rainforest. I represent my clan in looking into the socio-environmental justice that we are facing when the emergence of the carbon credit Wild West and climate solutions that are oppressing our global south. And I have a just thank you for putting this together, really, to hear you from all the perspectives. And I have come to the north, and I was sent to learn this language to be able to communicate when all of you find ways to bridge. When Rami, I feel that the sentiment to find ways to bridge the south and the north, and to recreate and redesign our trading routes.
That's right.
For a long time, we had this in our nations when maize, when corn, when potatoes, when jalapenos, chocolate, that was ours. You know, that was our trading routes, our way of sharing knowledge and maintaining our knowledge value chain, going back and forth. So I have a question, but I also have, I am leading, I don't know how, but I am leading one of the first indigenous-led climate research and resilient development institute in the heart of the Ecuadorian Andes. And in here, we are looking into leading the way to really think about methodology and procedures that come with the perspective of indigenous philosophy and indigenous perspective, to find new ways and alternative ways to really think about food systems, climate, and overall the social environmental justice. So my question is that, unfortunately, as I mentioned, unfortunately, I'm the only one that speaks English, and half of my team speak barely Spanish, and about 75% speaks only native language. So I would like to know if I could participate in representation of my team when the hopes that virtually I can connect when my team back home, which we just created our office in the center where I put the Wi-Fi, which makes it now makes it easy for me to communicate with them. And then myself, I'm visiting right now. I'm visiting New York. I'm looking for ways to really be present in this fellowship. And the reason why I'm joining, I'm looking to apply for the fellowship, is because virtually it loses the connection, the biochemistry of our forces together in AG, and we lose this common language. Even if we don't speak the native languages, we lose the common language of our cultures or our interchanges. So I'm looking for this fellowship because it will allow me to be in person in here and to absorb as much of the skills, the knowledge, all together we bring together, and be able to break that knowledge and mobilize it to the leaders in my institute, and also to the communities that are being part of the conversation. So is that a possibility that we can apply as a group, but one person?
Now, the only thing is, I don't know, I put my email there in the chat. I don't know if you can see. Okay, so you can contact me directly, because I think we have to navigate administrative issues. So what the 501c3 is, because we're part of the university. And so the university has its way of working. You know, we're also decolonizing the university. Like you talk about the institute, we have to decolonize the university, but the university still has requirements of 501c3, which are tax related. So I think that's the biggest question, is like, can you find a 501c3 in the US that can then be able to receive the funds and work?
I do have, we are affiliated, we have a fiscal sponsor that is a foundation based in the US, in New York City.
That's key, yeah. So once we do that, I invite you to email me and we can talk more, because I think this is a special, and we're trying to find ways to be able to absorb it, but I don't want to overpromise without first figuring out what the situation is.
Sounds good.
Thank you. And Brooke, I've added some next steps here as folks need to come up. If you need to come up, you're welcome to stay on. We can talk some more if you have more questions. Reminding you that the next info session is November 14th. So it's about group formation, and the application is open in December 1st. We have your email, so we'll remind you. We'll send you a reminder email so you know it's coming. Thank you all for your contributions. I know some of you may need to leave, but if you don't, I'm here until you're here.
I just wanted to share with the cohort that Indigenous people, I work with many Indigenous groups across Turtle Island, including Indigenous Caribbean, Indigenous Canada, Indigenous USA, and Indigenous Mexico. And because of the philanthropic work I've been doing over the last like probably over a decade, and then just being an Indigenous community itself, it's really important that we acknowledge the agency of Indigenous people and the autonomy with it, whether they're state treaty or detribalized, they have their own autonomy systems, they have their own governance systems, they are nations. So it's not the same thing as an ethnic group. There's a lot of politics to that, and with that, there's a lot of protocols and formalities. And land acknowledgement is just one of the many that we do to acknowledge the territory and governance system that we're on. So for my territory is Monze Lenape, and when we do things, we always include their voices and ask them how they want to be centered and how they want to be supported. Because what we don't want to do is to contribute to Indigenous erasure and erasure politics. And that can come in by meaning well, and it can also come by not meaning well. And so one of the things is you don't want to create like a saviorism allyship. You want to make sure that you're centering them, and if they're even asking for that support, because they might tell you, hey, we don't need that support, or actually, we do, we need you here. So it's really important to acknowledge their sovereignty and their political status, and to respect their elders and their councils before leaning into what I would say is like action. You have to wait, kind of like hold, because I know all of us want to help and be active, but they may not need that at this time, depending. And then each tribal nation is different. So I just wanted to kind of just give that information, because a lot of people don't know, because of the erasure politics, how Indigenous people actually form politically in the States.
Appreciate it, Brooke. Thank you. Yes. And remember that, like, again, we don't, as the fellowship, don't create any of those conditions. It really is for you all to pick who your leader is, what problems you want to make them. Like we said, our hands are tied because of administrative 501c3 pieces. We try in many ways to go over, beyond, and through some of those constraints, but they're not different than what you experience in your own organizations having to report taxes. So other than that, like really the freedom to be leaders, I think the hardest thing that been the process is to convince you all that you really have the autonomy to choose whatever you want to do and work with whoever you want to work with. And, whatever's going to come out is really the expression of your hard work. So I thank you all. It's such a pleasure to meet you all here. Thank you for taking this afternoon with us. And again, you have my email here, and we're really available to encourage you to apply. Thanks so much. Now
Thank you. Goodbye,
Bye, y'all.
everybody. Bye.
Hi, Denise.